here's our second example here, and this is a pretty typical redevelopment type example that we see here within the city of Walla Walla. We have quite a bit of area in our older part of the city that was once used for various things and has now become quite valuable land, given the fact that land prices are up, development is booming, and it's quite the business. So this is a redevelopment site, and again, there's going to be some pretty obvious things that we're going to discuss in here, but I think this is an interesting example for us for two reasons, and I'm sure you guys you may agree or may not, but it was something that even when they had to apply for their construction stormwater general permit, they ended up with an extra wrinkle or two, which was even surprising to the developer. So anyway, let's talk about this a little bit here. We are project area is 1.46 acres. The existing land use is light industrial or commercial. To be quite honest, this portion over here in the kind of northwest corner was being used as a recycling or e-cycling yard, if you will, by the property owner. So folks could bring their printers and computers and monitors back, and this was a e-cycling location. The rest of the property was basically being utilized as nothing more than a parking lot. So what I can tell you doesn't have a huge bearing on the example itself, but there are actually three lots: this lot behind it over here, this lot here, and this lot over to the east, which were all part of a binding site plan that came into the city, probably I would say in the late 2000s. So the property owner at the time wanted to develop this, and he did it in a piecemeal fashion. So the property to the east over here was developed first, and then these two lots were sort of left to be done at a later date. Most of this area that you see out here is gravel. There is a little bit of pavement that's over here, and there is a little bit of pavement that they found that was over here in this part of the sort of the north side of the property, but it really wasn't discovered until after they came in and did the geotech. So what it looks like out there is it's basically all gravel. So I can also tell you, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that there was a unregistered UIC dry well, if you want to call it that was located over here in the E-cycle area. So that was also discovered during the geotechnical exploration of the site. So probably not something that's uncommon, but it was something that we had to take a look at to make sure that they handled properly when they got rid of the site, because they were going to basically put a building on top of it. So. Okay, so the proposed land use is basically, again, light industrial commercial. So it is a commercial development that they wanted to come in and put in here. 20,000 square foot commercial development retail center with a 5,000 square foot parking lot. All right, so basically 25,000, roughly a little bit more square foot of impervious surface on the lot. The soil characterization out there was quite interesting, and we'll talk about that here a little bit more. There was a lot of fill material on top. Okay, so this site had been, like I said, had been used in the past, and it had been used for a couple of different things. So there was a lot of what the geotech considered to be unsuitable material for building on, which had to be over excavated off the site. And then below that was basically poorly graded gravel and silt with some sand and silty gravel in it from the borings. So if you're not familiar with this kind of material, it has a very high infiltration rate, and it just doesn't provide any treatment whatsoever. So hard to get water to slow down as it flows through here. So one of the other interesting points of the site is that, you know, they wanted to do infiltration on this site, and they had to kind of be careful in what zone they did it in. So something else that was kind of interesting out here. So there was an environmental site assessment that was conducted by the geotechnical firm to assess the site, mainly because there was a underground storage tank that had been located on this site previously. It had been cleaned up, but it had not been documented correctly and handled properly through the Department of Ecology. So it did show up on Ecology's site. So this was one of the reasons why I chose this site, because it was commercial industrial. As it turns out, what I found out in looking at the site, sort of the background is there was an old gas station out here back in the I believe in the 50s and the 60s. It was sort of located somewhere on the north side of the site. It's unclear as to where exactly it was, because it was not well documented. But we did have a UST that was located on the property, basically back along the north side here as well. So we also had this non-conforming UIC dry well that was located over here in the northeast corner. And when I say non-conforming, I mean when they did the site assessment, what they found was they found a catch basin, grate, and frame that was sitting on top of a plastic 55-gallon drum that was sunk into the ground that had holes drilled into the bottom of it. So it was identified as a UIC. It was obviously unregistered. Probably had been there for a long, long time. Also located in a spot that nowadays wouldn't have gotten registration for a UIC dry well. So that was one of the things that we had to make sure of when we were doing the site plan out here, is that the developer was going to properly abandon this UIC dry well and make sure that there was no contamination underneath it. So that was a consideration, along with the other considerations from the site assessment, that there could have been some sort of leaking underground storage tank out here that needed to be taken care of. So the good news, and a bit of a spoiler alert to all of this, is that there was really no contamination found on the site. However, there were some leftover chemicals that were discovered on the site that had to be abated before they could get approval to build the building out here. So they did have to install a system underneath the building to make sure they captured all of the aromatics that were still left in the soil that were detectable, so that they couldn't accumulate in the building up above. Okay, the depth to groundwater out here estimated to be about 22 feet below the groundwater surface. That was based on soil borings that were taken on the site, and the fact that there was no groundwater that was encountered whenever those soil borings were done. So this is one of these locations where they actually came out, spent the money, and got the information with a full geotech report. And as any of you have ever reviewed any of those reports will probably agree with me on it is really nice to have a full geotech report on your site, because you have access to a ton of information that typically is not there when those type of reports are not done. And typically those reports, by the way, don't just cover stormwater and things of that nature. They also discuss foundations, liquefaction, soil bearing, and what and how the site needs to be prepared for what's going to be put on top. So a great wealth of information when that does come in for us that are just looking at little things like how to take care of your stormwater. So, okay, the last thing here, proposed average daily traffic count. So it was characterized as a medium site by the engineer, because the parking area was going to generate between 40 and 100 trip ins per 1,000 square feet of gross building area. So again, no calculations that were provided on this. That's just what their statement was in there. We checked up on it and agreed with them. But again, in hindsight, this is something that I would have asked the contractor to actually provide the calculations on, just because it's kind of nice to see the calculations and where they're coming from on this. This next slide kind of gives you a layout of where the soil borings were taken. It's overlaid on top of a picture of the site as it looked before it was actually cleared and the development started. And then on top of that, they kind of overlaid their conception of what they wanted to do as far as the building and the parking lot. So you get an idea of three different concepts here on this plan. So basically, the building was going to occupy this western part of the site over here. The parking lot was going to occupy this eastern part of the site over here. Access was going to be off of Rose Street here. And as you can see, they did soil borings both along the north side and the south side, and a couple underneath the building, just to show what was going on here. Here's a sheet from the geotech report, which gives you an idea. Not all the soil borings were done to the same depth. Okay, this is pretty common if you've ever seen these before. Interestingly enough, the location of infiltration, where they did the infiltration out here, was kind of out in the middle of the parking lot. They didn't do any soil borings underneath there. Okay. In hindsight, I would have probably suggested that the contractor come out and do a soil boring underneath that gallery. What we did instead on this one is we put a requirement on the developer that he add a note to the plan saying that they do a perk test underneath the gallery prior to construction to confirm of what the infiltration actually was underneath the gallery itself. We wanted to make sure, because there was a lot of fill that was out here, that they weren't constructing this in a location that was maybe unsuitable. So we wanted to make sure that the soil was similar all the way around. And as it turned out, it was. So, so you can see here, B0, B9 and B10 were the two that were closest to the infiltration areas. So 9 and 10 are these two borings over here on the far right side. They only went down to 10.5 feet and to 5 feet. Okay, so in future consideration here, probably would have been better if those were a little bit deeper, but in their minds, this was going to be under the parking lot, so there's going to be no need for it. The deepest borings that they did were 5 and 7, and 5 was located underneath the building on the backside. 7 was located underneath the building, basically on the south side here. So they went the deepest on these, down to 20 and 22, 20.5 and 22 feet, respectively. And basically it was the same material underneath it all the way down, never ran into any groundwater. And basically they were doing this to for consideration on their type of foundation and what kind of support they were going to get. So one of the things in the site assessment that they did find were some leftover constituents that were in the soil that both the state and the city decided needed to be handled in some form or fashion before the development could be completed. And so I kind of wanted to turn you on to that. I'm not sure if it's kind of a busy drawing here to see, but the site assessment went out and actually did test pits along with the soil borings that they did. And in those test pits, they tested for different type of soil gases based on what had occurred out here in the past on this site. And kind of hard to see on the screen here, but they had hits on benzene, looks like naphthalene, and butylidene. Okay, so those three constituents came in above the MOTCA standard screening levels. So it didn't mean that they couldn't put their building or their development in out here. It just meant that they had to do something about this before they did it. So what the developer decided to do is underneath the foundation of the building that they built, they decided to put a air extraction system in to basically suck the air out from underneath the foundation, so that it would not accumulate inside the building and cause any harm to any of the folks that are going to be inside. So that was an added cost to them, but it was a requirement based on the state MOTCA requirements and the city's requirements as well. So as it turned out, it was kind of interesting to watch the system go in. If you've ever lived in a location where you've had radon or radon detected underneath your slab or your crawl space in your house, it's very similar. They just put in an extraction system that pulled those gases out and vents them out to the atmosphere. But what you can see in this little photograph over here of the site on the left is we had some, we had these locations of these former underground storage tanks that were a concern. So they did a pretty heavy testing over here in this area. They also did test pits that were over here in the corner where this e-cycling location was. And that happened to be the location where they were picking up some of these other constituents in the soil. So that's what led them to basically put in this type of system. As you look at this, obviously, if you remember our flow charts that we have both in our handbook and the manual, you can see this pretty much is going to come in as a large project for us, which means they're going to have to follow, basically either all the core elements, or they're going to have to, make a decision on whether or not they're going to follow the UIC rule. All right. And in doing so, they're going to have to come in and basically look at those site suitability criteria. And specifically, one of the things that I found very interesting is on this site, they did decide to do infiltration. All right. They made the decision to do it, and I think was actually a good one, because they didn't want to do anything on the surface, given the fact that they had to remove a lot of the unsuitable material, which was fill on the site, and bring in other material that they were just going to have to compact down. The site proponent also really wanted to put down as much paved area as possible on this, which is kind of a opposite approach for stormwater management. But we didn't disagree with them on this for the simple reason that there had been some contamination possibly on the site at one time, and we just thought it was a better idea to seal this thing off And if they could make it work in every other way, then we were all for them having to put down their concrete, turn it into a parking lot, and not have those surface features like ponds or swales or any other BMPs that they would have to maintain above grade. So that's sort of the tack that they came in for when they wanted to talk to the city, and we were all ears about that, because as we see this, this is basically a cleanup that occurred for this site. It happened because the developer wanted to put a building in a parking lot here, and we were all for it. We were able to clean up a possible underground storage tank site that the city had not budgeted to do, and was not really on anyone's radar, and was going to get done. And there was going to be a commercial property that was put in there as well. So we saw that as a win-win. As it turned out, if you're not aware, there is a section in the WAC on UICs that requires people to, if they're going to decommission a UIC, they're supposed to do it in a certain way. It's supposed to do it properly. And this was one of the first sites that I had ever worked on that had a existing UIC that was going to be decommissioned. So we had to take a look at that language, contact ecology, and make sure that there were special notes that were put on these plans to make sure that the contractor out there was aware of this and was able to handle it. So that was something that was kind of new for the city. I kind of wanted to turn you on to what they finally proposed out here, and a couple of twists that occurred during the review process. So here is the actual footprint of the building over here on the west side of the site. This is all the parking lot over here, as you can see. What they ended up doing is they ended up putting in a infiltration gallery. In particular, they put the storm chambers in underneath the parking lot. It was a 55 by 35 foot, basically, gallery of these chambers that were out here. They ended up sizing this gallery for the 100-year event. We, as you may recall, we only require them to size it for the 25-year event. But we also wanted them to analyze what was going to happen in the event that we had a storm that was larger than that. We wanted to know where the stormwater was going to go. And so in the spirit of them making sure that the site was all sealed up and that no stormwater ran off of this site, they were amenable to the fact of sizing their system to handle the 100-year event. And as it happened, just so happens, they have the ability to do so with these really high infiltration rates that they found underneath the site. So the other feature that they had to do out here was they obviously had to do some treatment for the parking lot area. It was a medium-sized site, so they had to provide something more than just basic treatment. And so what they ended up putting in was a cartridge filtration system that all of the PGIS runoff went into the stormwater galleries. Now, when we first started to take a look at this, there's a lot of runoff that comes off of this commercial building, obviously. This runoff is not required for treatment because it's NPGIS. So they had initially considered running all of this through the cartridge filter system. And we reminded them they didn't have to do that because they didn't have to treat for that to the same level. So what they ended up doing was basically just rerouting, repiping that so that they caught all of the flow here at the front of the building, and they ran it into the infiltration galleries, but they did it on the other end so that it didn't have to go through the treatment portion, which was on the eastern side. Um, the other thing that is kind of interesting here, which we kind of wrestle with here at City of Walla Walla, and I'd be interested to hear what other jurisdictions do, is this long area over here is a loading dock for this building. So it's a location where they can back their semi trailers down to the edge of the building and unload their trucks. Okay. So it's also located next to their source control feature here, which is their garbage, for lack of a better description, their solid waste, on-site solid waste facility where they store their dumpsters. Okay, so we come across this a lot, and we struggle with this on how to deal with it, because our codes say that you're not supposed to run stormwater into our sanitary sewer. However, we'd love to be able to do it in instances like this where we can actually keep that separate and run that water into the sanitary sewer. So we kind of came up with a different idea here. Did you have requirements for inspection and maintenance of the infiltration galleries? Yes. What we asked them to do is inspect every year for 2 years to make sure that the galleries are functioning properly. Okay, so for the first 2 years, they're going to do annual inspections. And after that, we told them that they could come up with a less frequent schedule as long as they could back that up with some kind of information. So in other words, if they inspect and they find that there's going to be issues out there, there needs to be some sort of cleaning or whatever, then they have to provide that proper maintenance. And more importantly, it was for the cartridge filters, because we said you're going to have to follow the manufacturer's recommendations on the cartridge filters, but we'll give you a couple of years of operation to see what comes up. And after that, if it's less frequent, then great, you can show that. And as long as it's okay with the manufacturer, fantastic. If not, you'll have to keep up on the annuals. So, and then the next question here is, are they required to report their inspections to you? The answer is yes. And typically they don't report them to us. We go hunt them down because they would just as soon do their inspections and then not actually report them to us. So we have this on our list to track them down and get that information. Does the city do regular inspections on the cartridge filtration system? And did the cartridge system have bypass? The city will be doing regular inspections, but it's going to be part of the 5-year inspection program that we have. As a matter of courtesy, we asked the property owner to include us in on the first couple of years of inspections, just because we wanted to be present, and it would save us the hassle of finding out that they did it last week or last month, and we could have been out there if we wanted to. So the answer is we did participate in the first year inspection, haven't in the second year yet, but yes, it is going to be included in the 5-year inspection plan. And we've just kind of partnered up with them because we want to keep an eye on this ourselves. And the cartridge system, yes, it does have a bypass system set up in it. This is a standard, I believe it's Contec system that is constructed. So I believe there is a bypass system in it. Yes, Doug, you had your hand up.
Yeah, that Contec system does have a bypass. Their standard product does have a bypass. It combines with the treated water right at the end of the device. It's probably going into the infiltration system. So they can handle the 100-year storm coming to the treatment system. They'll treat essentially the runoff design storm, which is about a 6-month storm, and all the water in excess of that will bypass. And it'll all end up in the storm
galleries.
Chambers. And those storm chambers are a UIC, so they need to be registered.
They were registered. Yes, they were. Yep. Yeah, we made sure of that. So thank you for pointing that out. And actually, I had a picture, I think, in the slides yesterday of my of this actual system in the parking lot. So it was a very visible site. It was on a pretty busy street out there. So there was no hiding on this site. Any and every inspector in the city was driving by this at least once a day. And so it was something that we were getting constant reports on. So the other interesting thing that I'll bring up on this site was, and I kind of alluded to it before, but I'll mention it here now, is and I'm not sure how many of any other people have had this happen before, but as I mentioned, the site was required to get a construction stormwater general permit from ecology because of the amount of disturbed area. Along with that, ecology required an amendment to their permit, and I believe that's what it's called. Doug, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but because there was the existence or potential of contaminated soil out here, there was a special provision, if you will, that was slapped onto their permit. And so this is the first time that I'd ever gone through one of these. It worked out really well. This happens on the ecology side of things. They do that research. They set this special provision up, and what it amounted to was is that during the construction of this site, they basically had to prove that there was not going to be any water that was going to be leaving this site. So they weren't allowed to have any water flowing off the site, no matter what was happening out there during construction. So the contractor was required to have a couple of pretty large Baker tanks installed out here, and they were required to capture all the water on the site, put it in the Baker tank, and then test it and prove to ecology that there were no contaminants of concern that were in there before they got rid of that water. So it was a interesting nuance with the permit. Happened to work out pretty well for them at the site, and it was just really interesting to work with ecology on this. It was, like I said, it was my first time to do it, and I was really impressed to see how ecology took care of that. So
It was likely to be called an agreed order.
thank you,
AO.
an AO. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. I knew it was something like that, and the thing was is I kept bugging the ecology people because I was like, can you clue me in on what this is, because I've never heard of it before, and I'd really like to know what's going on. So they were very kind in copying the city on all of the coordination and communication in between the property owner, the contractor, and themselves, so that we were really up on what was going on out there. So this is something at the city of Walla Walla. We have a lot of these legacy sites around town that have instances where we have these issues where we have commercial sites. They're typically either fast food restaurants or some other kind of commercial sites that have some sort of dumpster bins at their locations, and they end up being a real problem because that water tends to not be piped to the sanitary sewer, because that is against one of our city ordinances, and so therefore it ends up getting into the stormwater system that's located on the site, and that's a bit of an issue because that's a no-no as well. So in this case, what we did is we actually had them adjust the grading at the site so that all of this area out here graded back down to this location where we put a catch basin in. And then we had them install a coalescing plate oil water separator that was on the pipe going toward the system, or back toward the infiltration galleries. And I got to say that this worked out really well. It was an added expense to the property owner and the contractor. They barked about it a little bit, but I think for us in the long run, it's really going to be something that's going to be easily maintained for them, and something that really proved to be a bonus for us, since this is a site where it's a food service location, it's a commercial place. they have all sorts of stuff that they throw out there, and it can be a source control issue if you let it become one. So we've actually talked a lot here in Walla Walla about what to do about source control like this. In the old days, we really wanted to put a cover on these dumpster bins, and it's been a thing of contention, mainly because the city does its own has its own sanitation system here, so we have our own trucks. There's also some private businesses that collect the trash from dumpsters in this area, so there's a bit of a competition there. And what we found is that if we put covers on these dumpster bins, they end up impeding the way the trucks can come in and dump the garbage. So we're still working on how to handle or how to better handle this type of source control in an ongoing way. So if you guys, other jurisdictions, have some ideas, I'd love to hear that. And if you have any requirements or anything else, I'd love to hear that too. So you can either talk about them here, or we can talk about them, later offline.
There is a BMP in the manual for S427E.
Yep.
BMPs for storage of liquid food waste.
Yes.
For dangerous waste containers.
Yes.
And storage of liquids and permanent above ground. So, and transfer of, so there are source control BMPs in the manual.
Yes.
That could be followed.
Gotcha. Yep. I gotcha. And again, we've what we've kind of done is in the past, and again, we have a lot of legacy problems with this, Doug, but we've tended to have these guys come out and create berms, if you will, to capture any of the runoff, and then install some sort of system that basically does not drain to the storm drainage system. So it can be costly for them, but that's what we've been tending to do is to basically separate it off in some form or fashion. Our last slide is, so here's what we ended up with. Here's the final product. So you can kind of see how things are laid out here. As you can tell, this is in a fairly industrialized area. So even though it was a not so pretty site to begin with, we at the city, we certainly enjoy looking at something like this more so than what was there before. And just to give you an idea of what else is going on here, so this other parcel in the site plan is what's considered a RV storage area. Okay, and then the parcel that's over here on the east side was converted into a commercial site. I believe it's a agricultural repair and some other offices that are located in that building, in those buildings that are on that side. But the city was quite pleased with the way this development turned out. As you can see, we had them do some site improvements along here. There was existing stormwater system that was located out in the street, and it went to a system that was located basically a little bit further to the south. So we did not require them to do any other improvements to the storm drainage system in this road, other than just basically the curbs and the gutters, make sure they were up to par, and then the site entrances. So this one did not include any of that.